Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
I would say the biggest, most common theme is just disruption. And this is true whether they're a large corporation or a small company. Clients are coming to us because they see the potential to either disrupt their industry or the potential of being disrupted, basically, by this combination of physical devices, sensors, and the cloud.
Because of the technology and the data available, the biggest and most interesting challenge in designing an IoT product is to make it feel more like a service or an experience than a piece of hardware. Only after you understand your customer and what the opportunities really are can product design begin. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, I speak with Gordon Hui to get an Uber designer's perspective on how to find that ideal product experience and the business that must be developed to support it.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is made possible by sales of my book, IoT Inc., published by McGraw-Hill, and the IoT Inc. Certified IoT Professional, or ICIP, online training and certification program. Become a certified IoT professional by completing the program's 3 courses: ICIP Technology, ICIP Business, and ICIP Strategy and Digital Transformation. Details of which can be found at www.iot-inc.com. That's www.iot-inc.com.
With me today on episode 16 is Gordon Hui. Gordon is Vice President of Strategy at Smart Design, a design consulting firm that builds IoT products for B2C and B2B companies. With over a decade of experience, he has deep expertise in designing new services and exploring new technologies. Gordon's also a frequent writer and presenter on the Internet of Things, and his perspectives can be found online at Harvard Business Review and Fast Company. Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bruce. It's good to be here.
So, what have you been occupied with over the last day or two?
What have I been occupied with over the last day or two? Well, I'm based out of New York. It's been a pretty rough winter here, and so for me, It's just been kind of nice to enjoy the sun a little bit amongst the other things I've been doing at work and at play.
All right, so you're getting a little bit of sun on the East Coast.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background in IoT.
Sure. So I, as you mentioned, work as a VP of Strategy at Smart Design, and in this capacity, I'm leading some of our IoT-related projects, both with B2B companies and B2C companies, and in many cases with companies that are fairly well-established in whatever industry or business that they're in. And in doing so, a lot of things we do, obviously, is helping them to identify and design for that experience that leverages the technology that they have available to them. But we're also spending quite a bit of time helping these companies build their product strategy, understanding product market fit, and exploring business models, because fundamentally, for these companies, what they're trying to do is so disruptive, not only to their industry, but even to their own businesses.
Yeah, no, it's true. When you launch an IoT product, you're really launching an IoT company at the same time, aren't you?
Very much so. And so all those things around understanding how am I going to go to market, how might I price this, what capabilities do I need to build, really become an interesting challenge. And oftentimes people think of it in terms of small companies, but even for our large corporate clients, it's a fair challenge as well.
Now, do you see any differences, I guess, in preparedness or point of view between small and larger companies?
I see it really varies with client to client. I think what you in general see, though, obviously, is when it's a small company, this is a bet the farm opportunity, and they've got all their people lined up against it, including all of their budget. Whereas for for some of our clients, even if it is a bet the farm opportunity, it's a slow transition in terms of making the investment and creating the business case and all the other things that happens in a corporate environment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what about between B2B and B2C? Obviously there's different product characteristics, there's different, I guess, focuses, but are you seeing any differences in the companies that are approaching you, again, with the people and the approach and kind of their point of view?
I wouldn't say so much in terms of the people and the approach. I would say that in B2B, before we talked about Internet of Things, there's always been machine to machine and industrial internet and things like that. And so for a company like a GE, being able to run your locomotive 1 mile faster or be able to prevent a breakdown can affect your business on the order of magnitude of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And so the logic of it is well established. Mm-hmm. What ends up being the toughest challenge in terms of contrasting B2B versus B2C is oftentimes in B2B, your user is different from your customer, which is to say, the person who's actually spending time on the platform or using the product on a day-to-day basis isn't necessarily the person who's paying for it. And so really understanding the role and responsibilities and what they want to see between those two different types of people and all the different people in between has a huge impact on how we think about things like data and things of that nature.
Are you seeing companies, speaking, from the industrial side, are you seeing companies coming to you with M2M experience, or more of the companies kind of looking at this fresh and starting really with an IoT experience or perspective?
In our case, I think because we're a design and innovation firm, we disproportionately see companies that are newer to the space, less M2M experience, in some cases coming from an analog background. And making this jump because they need to. And that's really the focus of a lot of my writing as well, as I think about what I've written about and mused about on Harvard Business Review and Fast Company is it's really focused on those companies who are making their first attempt at building a IoT experience and some of the things that they need to think through.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, before we get into it, I always ask this. What's something a lot of people don't know about you?
What do people not know about me?
What's something interesting?
I would say, in my spare time over the past decade, I've spent quite a bit of time traveling and doing long hikes in between projects. And so one of my best hikes was summiting Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. Nice. And that was a lot of fun and an amazing experience. And more recently, I went to New Zealand and hiked the Routeburn Track. And so I think for me, my real goal left in terms of traveling is going to Antarctica. It's the one continent I haven't been to yet, and I'm going to knock that off my bucket list in the next few years.
What about, notwithstanding any earthquakes, but what about Kathmandu and Everest? Any base camp or any inclinations there?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think it'd be amazingly exciting, and at the same time, I'm at a point where I'm probably being more cautious about some of my hiking and traveling choices, and certainly have a lot of empathy right now as we think about some of the things that are happening in Nepal and the things that those people are going through right now.
For sure. Well, I'm interested in, so you're seeing a lot of clients and with, we've already established small ones, big ones, business oriented, business focused or pointing, or I should say, directed and consumer directed. What are the motives generally behind your clients to work with you guys? Why are they going to smart design?
Well, I think the companies that come to us, interestingly enough, often come from a variety of industries. So we work in healthcare, we work in transportation, we work in home and building automation and wearables. And I would say the biggest, most common theme is just disruption. And this is true whether they're a large corporation or a small company. Okay. Clients are coming to us because they see the potential to either disrupt their industry or the potential of being disrupted basically by this combination of physical devices, sensors, and the cloud. And in essence, what we try to do at Smart Design is we provide them this mix of design capabilities, and that's industrial design, which is, say, physical design, interaction design, visual design, communication design, along with the development engineering components, and also just the strategy thinking, the understanding of users and product, and more entrepreneurial type of strategies to help make these complex innovations come to life. And whether it's a company that's really going on their first journey into the IoT space and they're really coming in at the beginning, or it's a company who has at least an initial prototype, our goal is to help them to get that thing into market and really create and capture value.
So interesting that you say, the companies are coming, they're developing an IoT product because it's basically disruption for the purpose of disruption. It's to maybe leapfrog an existing competitor. It sounds like it's more of an offensive move right now, which maybe makes sense with early adopters than a defensive one.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the companies that I've in particular worked with over the past 12 to 18 months, it's still early days of Internet of Things in their industry, and there may be a lot of talk about it. There may be a competitor who's put out something really small, or in some cases nothing at all.
Right.
And so they're seeing it as an opportunity to drive growth, really change their business model, and do something that they think can put them in a good position down the line.
In a better position than they're in now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm interested, what's the profile? Who's generally leading the charge within the companies? Like, are you seeing any, correlation with job title, with, science versus design, or technology versus design, maybe level or how high up they are up the org chart? Are there any characteristics of the people that kind of are the ones that are raising their hands and maybe leading the charge with your company?
In our case, we do often see that the primary client within the company can come from a quote-unquote innovation group or corporate ventures group, and the person there might have a title like VP of Innovation or something along those lines. But realistically, I think in this space, the primary client within the company can come from any part of the organization. And there are times where we work directly with the C-suite, even in a large multi-billion-dollar corporation, because the IoT opportunity is going to be so transformative for them, and it represents something that they really want to stay on top of. And similarly, that might be true of a really small company, because by definition, we're working on their only growth opportunity, and we're working on a lead team. But I think once we begin working on the project, we often end up working with a lot of different parts of the organization, especially as the product becomes more real. And there you start to see and unpack the diverse aspects of any IoT product. And so, for example, I worked on a B2B project last year, and there was literally every function involved. There's a marketing team involved. There's a finance guy involved. There was a corporate development guy who was responsible for M&A involved. There's IT involved. There's R&D, design and research. You name it, they were represented in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's really one of the big challenges is because of the nature of the experience and the product, you really have to have a variety of different people in the mix, or a variety of different perspectives in the mix, because it is such a different animal relative to what typically companies are putting out.
Yeah, and as we were saying earlier, it is transformative to the company itself. So having representatives from each of the different departments is probably a smart move, just because every single department is generally affected by launching a product like this.
Yeah,
and it's interesting. So you're saying that people, and it's an evolution, right? So there's going to be a smaller team, maybe 1, 2, 3 people are going to approach you, and then it's going to grow over time. But you're saying the smaller team or person can come. You would think it would come out of innovation, but since we're such early days, I think what you're saying is it could come pretty much from anywhere within the company.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And I think one of the things that we often work with our clients on is thinking about how do they scale the project over time, because you don't really want 20 people in the stew in the beginning. It's not efficient.
Right, makes sense. Yeah, right.
Jeff Bezos talks about 2 pizza teams, right? And in a lot of ways, a project like this is really a 2 pizza team type project. But as you get closer to realization, it does become more important to figure out how are you going to bring in the other partners and other functions so that this doesn't stop at being just an idea or even a great prototype or a great pilot, but really something that can be revenue generating in terms of a business and has the support from the environment that a business unit brings.
Well, why don't we move on to the steps? So what I'm interested in hearing from you are, at a high level, what are the steps that are taken when you're creating, when you're working with your clients toward creating an IoT product? Maybe you can just take us through the steps of how to get there.
Yeah, I think the first step for us is just an opportunity phase, in essence, where we're just trying to understand the customer and how are we going to even create value for him or her. And so that, especially coming from a design organization, that often means doing in-context research. So if it's a product for a sports athlete, we're going to visit sports teams, at the high school and university, college, and professional level. If it's a product for building managers, we're going to visit office buildings. And fundamentally, what we're trying to do there is just to get an understanding and an exploration of what are the jobs that we could be doing, what are the benefits this person is seeking, what are their pain points. And for us, nothing beats talking with the potential customer and using the power of design research to find that opportunity and really align on what it really means for the business. So oftentimes in parallel, we're talking to stakeholders in the company and seeing how are they thinking about this opportunity, how are they thinking about their competition, to have that kind of internal-external perspective.
Okay, so first you're understanding the company, understanding the end user, and you made the distinction before, where sometimes on a B2B situation, it's not, the customer isn't the end user. So I'm assuming you're going to the end user in that case.
Yeah, and if it's a B2B situation, we're doing research at multiple levels of the organization, and so for a building automation type project, you have to at some point get down to the maintenance worker or the engineer as much as the building manager, because it's going to impact them and their experience as well.
Right. Okay.
From there, it becomes a lot about understanding what the opportunities really are and understanding some top opportunities to design for and explore through various types of prototypes. Okay. These prototypes, if you were coming from a lean startup perspective, will feel MVP-like in nature, just really lean. And we still do a lot of things, especially for screens, where it's just paper prototypes in a lot of ways, or really simple prototypes. Because at this point, you're mostly trying to understand the ideal user experience, and you don't need a lot of depth, and you actually don't want a lot of finish, because you're fundamentally trying to explore and push things and figuring out what the service is, right? That might be accomplished through your combination of physical, digital, and the cloud. And then beyond that, it becomes a lot more around how far beyond the ideal experience is our client seeking from us, and what are their capabilities and what are their needs from a design and innovation partner like us. And so it might go down a path of where we're doing quite a bit of the physical design or quite a bit of the digital design or the whole thing. In some cases, they might have development partners that they want to leverage, and maybe they feel like they can do more of it themselves.
Okay. And what do you mean by ideal experience, going beyond the ideal experience?
Well, I think in this piece where we're fundamentally trying to explore a very new experience for our clients, it's helpful to imagine what the ideal experience could be, because you want that North Star. And then what you're then doing is, in essence, backtracking to, all right, what really feels like your roadmap to get to that ideal experience, and in particular, what's generation one of the product that you feel like will really meet the needs and the goals of this offering, and then scale your way back up. And so oftentimes with our clients, we're kind of mediating that vision with, hey, we want to get something out in the market that can be at least pilotable and test our way and learn our way to an ideal.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, your experience when the company approaches you, what's best for them? I guess what's the homework? I mean, what should they have done before talking to you? Again, listeners are potential clients of yours. What would be your advice to our listeners as to how to prepare for engagement with a company like Smart Design?
Yeah, and it's obviously one of the big things we think about quite a bit, because we have clients that come in at various points. And I think what you're hearing in my expression of what we're solving for with clients is it's a journey to build an IoT experience, and in all likelihood, it's going to be a very long journey. So, and some of our clients basically are coming in with a very high-level opportunity that they want to explore. Some of them are coming with a basic prototype and transitioning to a pilot potentially, and some of them are really in the throes of building the product. And so, to me, the most important thing is just making an honest assessment about what stage of your journey are you really in, and are you more at the opportunity point or are you at the realization point? And also just being really honest about what capabilities do you have in-house and what might you need to build by our partner. And so my example of a story around that was we often see a lot of entrepreneurs come in, and we had a situation a couple years ago where a gentleman came in and wanted to build a smart bike lock targeted at bike sharing services. And we've certainly seen a couple of products like that come out in the market over the past couple of years since then. And he came in, he flashed a business plan, and fundamentally had a really novel concept for how a bike sharing bike lock would work in terms of a business, but it just didn't have a real logic around why bike sharing services would require a bike lock, right? And how would you why would this be value additive relative to the bike lock that's already a part of any bike sharing system? And so for us, he was at a point where he really needed to take a step back and try to figure out the opportunity, not necessarily build the thing. And that's really where the design effort should be placed on. But he felt very differently, and I think, but he also couldn't justify it. And so for us, we ultimately had to decline that opportunity, not because we didn't believe in the potential of a smart bike lock, but we saw evidence that, this was not going to be where he really needed to solve. And in our situation, we really take pride in making innovation a reality and helping companies get to realization, but you have to first understand the opportunity first and really know if you're in the right place to get to realization.
Well, and that's where I was hoping you were going to go, because you were discussing, internal assessment in a few different ways, but you didn't really discuss a business assessment except for now with this, with the story. So, to what extent? I mean, my perspective would be that before moving on to this step, that there's been a considerable amount of planning from the business point of view, doing the business strategy. And I think that's right up your alley as well. So maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think really for a lot of our clients, they know there's an opportunity out there. They might have made an initial business case, certainly enough to begin the exploration. And that's fine. And I think a lot of cases, part of the design process is about unpacking the business opportunity along with the design opportunity. And so it's not so much that they need to have and come in with, this is exactly our business model and this is exactly our pricing strategy, and we already know who the target customer is. Because then if you already know all that, in a lot of cases, it's not such a transformative innovation opportunity, and it's probably more of a product development opportunity. But for us, what's really important is that you're honest about where you need to spend time in your exploration and not go straight towards building something for the sake of building something, because the building part is not going to be any easier, and you don't want to spend a bunch of money building something that doesn't have any practical, product market fit.
Right. So I'm just trying to still, kind of correlate what you're saying. On one side, you're saying you can't know it all. I mean, you can't have the complete business strategy figured out. But as in the case with the bike lock, the shareable bike lock, I think what you're saying is you at least need a directional vector on the main points, or am I not getting that?
No, that's definitely the case. And for us, we obviously have opportunities to work with a variety of clients, and so we can see those clients that come in and fundamentally what's their level of exploration intent and what's their ability to potentially grok the challenges and the opportunities of building something like this. And I think we obviously get more excited the more we think that our client has that potential to really be a part of the war, not just the battle of building an IoT product.
Right. To be able to take it across the finish line, not just sort of create it in the first part.
Right.
Okay. Well, I want to go back to the journey. So, starting out, there's the opportunity phase you were talking about, and understanding the opportunity a little bit more. And then and then there's the prototyping. You were talking about the prototyping, and usually it's pretty simple. What happens after that? Is that where smart design lets go? You did say that sometimes the client would prefer to work with different technology companies, or are you passing them on to integrators at that point, or what happens after the prototypes? I was assuming then there's a number of iterations on the prototype. What happens after that?
It really depends on the client, and some of our clients have established development partners and engineering partners that they want to work with, and so we might pass off something that's more at a prototype stage. For some of our clients, we're going a little further and leveraging our own team as well to drive some of that development. It mostly just kind of depends on the needs of that client and what capabilities they have in place.
Right. Okay. So, but mostly, at least, obviously, I guess it's maybe in the name of the company, but you're more focusing on the design and the execution. You can be part of it, but often, or in some cases, you'll be partnering, or you'll be just basically, I guess, letting it go to someone else. Is that how it works?
Yeah, in some cases we do, and usually what we're trying to do is at least get the client through the first pilot. Just because that's usually a huge milestone for them, or at least trying to get through, the capabilities piece of it, so that they know when they leave us that they can actually make it happen, which is not a small detail for a lot of our clients.
No, and I imagine it's not a smart detail for any of your clients. But describe then, what is the first pilot? What does that look like?
It varies quite a bit, obviously, between B2B and B2C. I think one of our more interesting opportunities has been working with Gatorade and some of their efforts related to IoT. And so, obviously, when you have a company like Gatorade, they have access to a lot of different sports teams. And so, one of the more exciting things we did was we actually piloted their platform with the Brazilian national team. For soccer. And so it just kind of varies. And oftentimes, obviously, as a part of the design process, we might be prototyping different things along the way. And so that's just kind of depends on the project. It's hard to generalize in that regard.
I'm just wondering, though, the pilot, is this like a proof of concept? Is it working? Is it paper? Is it, an interface? Or is that, again, just sort of all over the map?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think pilot's kind of a very loose term. And sometimes pilots suggest like it's a huge test market with X number of customers over X duration. And certainly, like anything that's designed, we often do a lot of small experiments along the way to gain increasing validity about a direction. And we do a lot of those along the way, as much as we do the ones that feel like, the thing that we did with the Brazilian national team, where it's a longer duration, very intensive, much more, extended over the period.
Is the Gatorade product released, or is it still under wraps?
They're still building on it, but you can see some of the stories about it on our website at smartdesignworldwide.com.
Okay. Well, Gordon, we've been talking a lot about technology in this podcast, and there's a lot of different views, perspectives, I should say, for the engineering, the network engineer point of view, the IT point of view, the OT point of view. I'd like to get now the designer's point of view. How do you look at technology? If you were to break it up into blocks or kind of at a system level, how do you break it up from your perspective?
Yeah, there's probably three major components, and so one is just what the user sees, which is to say the end user touch points, and so that might be a phone or a device or a screen that they see. The on the opposite end, you have in essence the administrative touch points, which are kind of more back end or back of the office experiences, and although the customer may not see those experiences, we think those are oftentimes huge opportunities and as important in terms of creating an exceptional service for the target customer. And then obviously what you have is something in the middle, which is in essence the enabling infrastructure that allows for the IoT product or experience to happen, and that can happen in a variety of ways. And when you see people describe their technology stacks, you'll see a mix of different things happening. I think the big thing for us, obviously, when we're working with a larger corporation with more legacy systems, is there's just more complexity in that regard, as opposed to a small startup, which basically is starting brand new and has a little bit more flexibility.
Well, I'm intrigued about the administrative touch points, and I think I know where you're going with this, but maybe can you provide a little bit more detail as to what you meant where there's a lot of opportunity on the administrative side?
Well, I think oftentimes when we work with our clients, they have a huge focus on in essence the front end touch points, and in particular, what is it this person's going to see and feel, and how do you ensure the experience on the screen is the same as on the physical device, and that is certainly a large part of the design work that we do.
Sure.
But what we find is obviously when you think about some of the back end back of the office experience, making those things work out well has a huge impact on the end user in the long run, and ends up being kind of as meaty or as important as anything else.
What would be a good example of that?
Yeah, I'm trying to find one for you that I can talk about.
Right.
But
well, you can generalize it. I mean, just in the sense of being able to provide maybe more options, to their product, or being able to make the service or the operation of the product maybe a little bit more efficient. Is that kind of where you're going with that?
Yeah, and oftentimes, that has a lot of impact on how your data and your frequency of content and communications is when you're able to think through what is the back of the office experience or the back end experience. In creating that service.
Well, and that kind of also related, data related to the data and the information. To what extent are you putting, I guess, brain power on the data that's extracted and then somehow transforming that into useful information? Is that part of the design, or is that kind of a different discussion, more of a business discussion that you guys aren't involved in? Where does that fit in? We
think about it a lot, actually, because regardless of its flow, whether it's unidirectional or bidirectional, the frequency of data communication and the content of that communication are fundamentally very important questions that are a huge part of the design process. What does the user see, in a B2B context, and whether it's relevant to them as maybe more of a user versus a manager versus an administrator, that ends up being really important, and has by its nature big implications on energy consumption and scalability.
And what about I guess I'm curious on maybe the interaction that the user doesn't see, or maybe the data that's being collected. For example, obviously, the use cases are make a product better, service a product better, operate a product better, make new products. collecting that data, that's obviously one of the, if not the, incremental value of an IoT product is this information that you can gather and then transform into something, or data and transform into something. Are you thinking about that, or is that kind of outside the purview of more the hands-on, design parts of what you're focused on?
How the data gets converted into something meaningful is a huge part of the design process, and whether that's for a building management program, or a sports program or a wearables program, that's very much part and parcel to what we do. And so when you think about all the data that you could potentially collect in a building management program, what are you really presenting that's meaningful and in a timely fashion, and in terms of frequency that the person can grok and make actionable? When are alerts happening? Those are key parts of the design, and especially for something that's B2B, you often have a dashboard that you're creating.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's very much an important part of it. Likewise, for something that's more B2C, it's a similar challenge in terms of when do you present the information in a way that feels contextually meaningful, and has a nice interaction to it without feeling like it's an infringement on your privacy, becomes a huge opportunity and an issue at the same time. I was talking to some guys at Tesco, which is one of the large supermarkets in the across the pond, and basically his point was, as they were exploring potential ways of leveraging IoT and surfacing different types of offers, it's gotten to the point where companies have been doing it for so long in a variety of ways in the supermarket channel. Consumers at some level are okay with you having their data. They just want you to be able to do something meaningful with it, right? And provide something that's valuable
to them.
And I call that the Spider-Man effect of IoT, which is to say, with great power comes great responsibility, and there's an inherent ROI to that. And if you're not fundamentally taking that data and creating something contextually meaningful, then you're not living up to the Spider-Man effect or dilemma or credo in that sense, right? Which is fundamentally at where we are with IoT, which is, I think, can you fundamentally take all these things that you can do and provide and address in real time emergent needs in a predictive manner? Can you take the fact that you are able to do product refreshes over the air and do something more than what the product was able to do before when it was standalone and not updatable? And can you converge these different types of data points to create something that feels more like a service and an experience and less like a piece of hardware?
Yeah, and that seems to be a common thread in our conversation. Is you're commonly referring to it as an experience as opposed to a product, which I think is this the IoT kind of point of view.
Right.
Yeah. How many years, Gordon, have you been working on IoT projects?
I've been working on them probably for about 5 years now. My background actually started in the IoT space at my last job, where I was at the Hartford, which wouldn't be where you'd think of as a place where IoT was happening. But as you may know, the Hartford is an insurance and financial services company, over 150 years of history. And I was on their innovation and corporate venture capital team. And in essence, the role of that organization was to get this company that was in the middle of Connecticut with this long history into its future faster, which inevitably was going to involve a variety of trends, one of which was IoT.
Right.
And so we were experimenting with a variety of different IoT experiences and products. And our main product when I was there was, in essence, an IoT-based car insurance product, similar to Progressive Snapshot, if you ever seen those commercials. And so the driver's insurance premium is actually determined by how they actually drive, primarily through a telematics-based device. And so in a lot of ways, I think, although most people would not think of it that way, some of those people who have worked on insurance products that have this telematics-based orientation are probably among the people who understand what it takes to bring an IoT product to market, and have probably gone through some of this navigation of some of these challenges, both from a design and business perspective, for quite some time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in your 5 years of working with different companies on different projects, have you seen any common threads of what makes a successful IoT project? Are there best practices that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think there's probably a few things that show up quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
First is just acknowledging that hardware is hard, right? And just has a fundamentally different...
Don't just dismiss it.
Right. It's not an easy thing. It has a very different rhythm than software. And as much as, for example, people talk about Pebble and how successful of a Kickstarter story it's been, most people over time have forgotten that they missed their deadline pretty badly for really seemingly basic things, like the glue wouldn't stick the screen protector to the electric body, right? And then you throw in things like, if you want to create, say, 1,000 pieces of hardware, most people in a manufacturing plant would probably laugh you off, and so there's a fundamentally logic around hardware being hard that people coming from software really just have to appreciate more, I think.
Right. It's not just a physical manifestation of the software. It's a whole different beast.
Yeah. I think a second thing is really setting up internally, especially if you're coming from a large company, setting up internally for the IoT product to become a business. And so,
what do you mean by that?
As we mentioned earlier today in the conversation, you might start with a small team in getting this off the ground, but eventually you have to have a large team to commercialize and scale it into a business. And so a lot of times our corporate clients are set up in such a way that they sort of build it with one group, and then they throw it over the wall to another team, and that team is fundamentally focused on pushing it into the market. And that split is hard in a more traditional product. It's really hard for an IoT product. And a lot of times what separates timely success from inevitable failure is just your ability to manage that as well as you can.
And being more encompassing in terms of the team, you're saying that's part of the build part of it.
Yeah, and really know when to bring them on and scale them up. Because again, you can't have everybody be a part of the party all the time, and it doesn't make any sense. But as you get closer to market, really knowing when to bring in people along the way and scaling it so that it can be a business and it's already moving along, I think is really as much a role of the product owner or the product manager's job as anything else.
Yeah, and I think the answer is relatively obvious for a smaller company, but obviously Smart Design works with larger companies. What do you see from an organizational point of view? What emerges is it a separate business unit, or is it a horizontal? Is it something that's just basically part of all different organizations? How do you see the organization evolving in the larger companies to support the product? Yeah,
the model that I've seen most successful is you clearly want to start with a separate group that's this is their focus, and so you're in essence recreating the environment of a startup because this is how they're going to get fed, right? And
so it's a cross-functional group.
Yeah, it's a cross-functional group, but it's a small group. And then what you're inevitably trying to do is, as you get closer to the market and you're scaling up, you're starting to put in place the pieces that would be the different functions that eventually have to be represented. You're starting to roll in the eventual business unit owners, and in essence, by the time you're handing it off to a business unit, it's already running as its own small business, and all you're doing is leveraging the business unit scale to make it grow.
Okay, so you are saying then this we'll call it the small startup within the larger company does basically transform or go into a business unit. That's kind of the structure.
Yeah, it has to eventually be either going into a business unit or become a business unit unto itself, and you have to plan for that from the beginning and be very intentional about your process in making that happen. And you contrast that with building it within the business unit from day one. I think that's really hard to do because inevitably this is a long haul, and a business unit has quarterly numbers they're trying to hit. There's just a tyranny of the urgent that they're trying to solve for, and that pace and that logic of how you run what in essence is a cash cow business is very different from exploring a new IoT experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Likewise, you can't just keep it separate forever and ever, because fundamentally at some point you're going to need the scale and the support and the systems of a larger business unit. And if you're not constantly integrating the larger business unit or whatever is going to be the long-term entity along the way, it just never makes the jump. And we've seen that happen quite a bit as well in these types of design and innovation projects that are more complex.
No, that's useful. Okay, so hardware is hard. Agree. Setting up internally. Are there any other best practices that you've observed?
I think what we're seeing in some of our projects as well is that you really want to think about how you're taking advantage of the Internet of Things and really understand why you're doing it. And what we often find is just asking yourself a few basic questions about how or why is this IoT experience valuable to the customer? Why is it creating features that are core to your experience, and why does it lead to a meaningful business model? Just constantly asking yourself the why along those three vectors is really helpful in terms of anchoring you to something that's going to be meaningful for the customer and the business as a result.
So the three whys were why the customer would want it. What are the other two?
A lot of,
or was that one of them?
Yeah. So why does this product fundamentally solve a core need or benefit for the customer? Why do the features really represent a core to your experience that you're trying to create? And then why is this potentially enhancing to your business model?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right. Well, anything else you want to touch on in terms of a successful IoT project that you've observed?
I think some of the things that show up along the way is at some point you really want to focus on the first $1 million,
yeah,
as opposed to being overly focused on the first $1 billion. And it's not to say that we want to build $1 billion businesses, but if you spend a lot of time trying to figuring out what that $1 billion business is, or even that $100 million business is, to justify the investment, you're going to spend a lot of time spinning wheels that are really far down the line. And in particular, for a lot of our clients, the right market doesn't exist yet because no one has built it. And so treating it like an established business where you're creating this business case around the $1 billion opportunity is probably not as important as just kind of iterating and finding your business hypothesis along the way.
No, that's good advice. Gordon, where can people find more about yourself and your company? Where should they go online?
Yeah, you can find Smart Design on the web at smartdesignworldwide.com. And on this website, you'll find a lot of case studies, some of which are about IoT, some of which are about some of our digital and physical projects as well. You can also see some of our POV pieces that we've done on a variety of topics there as well. And we also have an active Twitter feed at Smart Design. So
at Smart Design. Okay, well, I'll put all this in the show analysis notes. Well, thank you. I appreciate the conversation. It was very informative, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Sure. Talk to you later.
Okay. That was a good talk with Gordon Hui. This podcast goes vertical, deep diving into different topics each week. If you prefer a more horizontal and structured approach to learning IoT business and its orbiting technologies, check out my book IoT Inc., published by McGraw-Hill, or become a certified IoT professional by completing the ICIP training and certification program. For details, just go to www.iot-inc.com. Also go to www.iot-inc.com for an analysis of this episode, links to things that were mentioned during the episode, and very importantly, the episode's PDF transcript. Just search for the name of the episode or the guest. If you're new to this podcast, subscribe. That way you'll get every week's episode delivered straight to your device. Or, if you've been listening for a while, there are 3 ways you can support the show. You can leave a rating or a review on iTunes. Just go to iot-inc.com/iTunes. It only takes 1 click to leave a rating, a little bit longer to leave a review. You can share it on social. I'm on LinkedIn, to a lesser extent on Twitter. And of course, you can support the show by buying my book, IoT Inc., or the ICIP training and certification program. It's how I pay the bills. Next week's episode is IoT Design, Nerding Out with a Good View with Jake Fields. I hope you can join me then. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Till next week, may your path to IoT business be an experimental one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.